Some people are born to change history, and then there are those who make the entire world bow before them. Napoleon Bonaparte, a young man born on the small island of Corsica, would one day become the most powerful man in Europe. He was not born into royalty. He was not a noble, but through pure military genius, he defeated nearly every great empire of his time. To the people, he was a hero. To his enemies, he was a monster of war. He once stood at the peak of power, only to fall into loneliness and defeat. This is the story of the man who almost conquered the world. Some people are born to change history, and then there are those who make the entire world bow before them. Napoleon Bonaparte, a young man born on the small island of Corsica, would one day become the most powerful man in Europe. He was not born into royalty. He was not a noble, but through pure military genius, he defeated nearly every great empire of his time. To the people, he was a hero. To his enemies, he was a monster of war. He once stood at the peak of power, only to fall into loneliness and defeat. This is the story of the man who almost conquered the world. Napoleon was born in 1769 on the island of Corsica. At the time, Corsica had just been taken by France. His family was not wealthy, but they were educated. From an early age, Napoleon was different. He was quiet, distant, but incredibly intelligent. At military school in France, he was often mocked for his Corsican accent, his small appearance, and being poorer than the noble students. But those humiliations created an enormous ambition inside him. Napoleon spent countless hours reading history, military strategy, philosophy, the conquest of Alexander the Great. He believed great men are not born, they create themselves. Opportunity arrived when the French Revolution erupted. France was drowning in chaos. The king was overthrown. War spread across Europe. And in that moment, Napoleon emerged as a military genius. In 1793, he commanded artillery at Toulon. The victory was so overwhelming that all of France took notice. What made Napoleon different was simple. He did not fight like the other generals. While Europe's armies moved slowly, fought rigidly, Napoleon moved with incredible speed, launched surprise attacks, divided his army before striking with perfect timing. He turned warfare into the art of speed. His soldiers loved him because he ate and slept beside them. He appeared in the most dangerous places. He inspired them before every battle. Napoleon once said, "A leader is a dealer in hope." After a series of victories, Napoleon's fame exploded across Europe. The French people saw him as their savior. In 1804, Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of France. The moment shocked all of Europe, because a man with no royal blood had placed himself upon the throne. He created new laws, educational reforms, economic systems, a modern administration. The Napoleonic Code would later influence many nations around the world. But along with power, his ambition continued to grow. Napoleon wanted to control all of Europe. Napoleon launched massive military campaigns across Europe. He defeated Austria, Prussia, Russia, and numerous European coalitions. The Battle of Austerlitz in 1805 became known as a masterpiece of warfare. Even though he was outnumbered, Napoleon crushed the strongest alliance in Europe. The nations of Europe began to fear him. Many believed Napoleon was unbeatable. At the height of his power, his empire stretched across much of Europe. But then, one mistake began to destroy everything. Napoleon decided to invade Russia. He marched with more than 600,000 soldiers. It was the largest army Europe had ever seen. But the Russians refused to fight directly. Instead, they kept retreating, burned their own supplies, destroyed entire cities. Then winter arrived. The cold killed hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Hunger, disease, endless snow. The army that once seemed invincible collapsed in the Russian winter. When Napoleon returned to France, he had lost almost everything. The nations of Europe united against him. Napoleon was defeated. He was exiled to the island of Elba. But the terrifying part was, he came back. In a short time, he gathered an army once again. Europe panicked, but this time, Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo. The final battle ended his empire forever. He was exiled once more, this time to St. Helena, far away from war, far away from power. And in 1821, Napoleon died alone. Napoleon was not a perfect man. He was a genius, a conqueror, a man who changed history, and someone consumed by his own ambition. But whether people admire him or hate him, one thing is undeniable. Napoleon Bonaparte became a legend, and more than 200 years later, the world still remembers his name.